The San Francisco elite think money buys everything, even the brain that built their empire. When my cheating husband handed me divorce papers to make way for his young mistress, he thought he won. He had no idea my signature triggered the absolute destruction of his family's $3 billion IPO happening that very afternoon. Drop a comment telling me where you are listening from, and subscribe if you have ever used your mind to crush toxic people. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Maya Revenge Stories. We want to take a brief moment to sincerely thank you for your continuous support, but unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with absolutely zero budget to keep operating. If you find today's story captivating, please kindly support us by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon, where you can listen to exclusive, true stories that are even better, significantly longer, and feature incredibly detailed situations that we simply cannot publicize on YouTube, all brought to life with multiple emotional voices in a single story. You can easily join by scanning the Patreon QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon channel link in the description or comment section of this video. Now, let us begin today's story, and my name is Sophia White. The air conditioning in the 50th floor glass boardroom of the Aegis Nexus Solutions Tower was set to a crisp 68 degrees, but the chill radiating from the other side of the mahogany table was far colder. I sat perfectly still. At 34 years old, I was officially the lead cybersecurity architect of the company, though the three people sitting opposite me preferred to view me as a minor inconvenience they were finally paying to sweep away. My husband of 7 years, Julian Sterling, sat in the center. He wore his tailored Italian suit with the unearned confidence of a man whose mother had bought it for him. He was the chief executive officer in name, a figurehead groomed for magazine covers while I built the actual architecture of his company's success in the shadows. Beside him sat his mother, Victoria Sterling. Her posture was rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line of aristocratic disdain. She had always hated me. To her, I was just the blue-collar girl from Oakland who had somehow tricked her golden boy into marriage. And then there was Chloe, at 23 years old. She was a self-proclaimed tech influencer whose greatest technological achievement was mastering social media lighting. She sat aggressively close to Julian, her hand resting conspicuously on his arm to ensure the massive diamond on her ring finger caught the fluorescent boardroom lights from every possible angle. Victoria slid a thick manila folder across the polished wood. The divorce papers. "Read it carefully, Sophia," Victoria said, her voice dripping with venom. "Though I doubt you will find anything to contest, Julian has been more than generous." I opened the folder. The terms were exactly what I expected from a family that believed money could erase any sin and buy any compliance. They were stripping me of all my equity in Aegis Nexus Solutions, demanding I waive any claim to the company just hours before it went public. $200,000, Julian said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "That is the settlement check attached to the back. More than enough for someone with your modest upbringing to start over comfortably." "It is frankly a charity," Chloe chimed in. She let out a high-pitched giggle that grated against the acoustic panels of the room. "I mean, Julian told me everything. You are just a keyboard monkey, right? Typing away in the back room while he builds an empire. You should be thanking him for letting you ride his coattails for 7 whole years. Plus, you will not need to worry about the Malibu house anymore." Victoria nodded sharply in agreement. "The Malibu coastal estate is being transferred exclusively to Julian. It is an environment suited for high society, which is precisely the atmosphere Chloe needs as she prepares to bring my first grandchild into this world." Ah, the unborn child. That explained the rushed timeline and their desperate need to finalize this divorce before the noon initial public offering. They wanted the slate wiped clean. They wanted the billionaire status, the new young wife, and the heir, all wrapped in a perfect public relations package. Julian looked at me, waiting for the breakdown. He leaned forward, expecting the tears, the screaming, the begging that usually accompanied a woman having her life ripped apart by a husband's betrayal. He wanted to feel powerful. He wanted to watch me shatter. Instead, I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, hard clarity. They actually believed I was nothing more than a glorified typist. They truly thought the empire they were about to sell to the public was built on Julian's mediocre business degree and Victoria's social connections. They were entirely oblivious to the fact that every line of code, every encryption protocol, and every impenetrable firewall that made Aegis Nexus solutions worth billions of dollars existed solely in my head and by my design. I looked at the check. $200,000 in exchange for the foundation of a $3 billion cybersecurity enterprise. I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice or offer a single plea. I simply picked up the silver pen resting beside the folder. "You are absolutely right, Julian," I said, my voice smooth and perfectly modulated. "This is exactly what I deserve." I flipped to the final page and signed my name with a steady, decisive hand. The ink flowed perfectly. I closed the folder, slid it back across the mahogany table, and then carefully detached the settlement check, folding it neatly into perfect thirds before slipping it into the pocket of my blazer. Chloe smirked, clearly disappointed that I had not caused a scene for her to mock. Victoria let out a heavy sigh of relief, immediately pulling the documents toward her like a vulture guarding a fresh kill. Julian smiled, a wide, victorious grin, believing he had just pulled off the heist of the century. I stood up from the leather chair and smoothed the front of my blazer. I looked at the three of them, perfectly framed against the sweeping, fog-covered skyline of San Francisco. "I hope you all have a truly memorable IPO ceremony," I said, offering them a quiet, chilling smile. Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and walked out of the glass boardroom. I did not look back. I did not need to. They thought they had just secured their future, but as the heavy boardroom doors clicked shut behind me, they had no idea I had just locked them inside their own digital tomb. The heavy glass doors of the Aegis Nexus Solutions headquarters slid shut behind me, sealing away the toxic chapter of my life forever. As my heels hit the pavement of the outdoor plaza, I stopped and took a massive, grounding breath. The crisp, salty air sweeping off the San Francisco Bay filled my lungs, instantly replacing the sterile, recycled oxygen of that suffocating boardroom. For the first time in 7 long years, the atmosphere tasted like absolute freedom. I did not waste a single second lingering on the past. Reaching deep into my leather tote bag, I bypassed the sleek company phone and pulled out a secondary, heavily modified device I had built from scratch. I opened a secure, heavily encrypted terminal interface and rapidly typed a single, irreversible command to my private server. "Protocol Omega, we are leaving." I hit send. The screen flashed a brilliant green, confirming the execution of the command, before I completely wiped the memory of the device clean. I flagged down a waiting black car and directed the driver to take me straight to San Francisco International Airport. Watching the towering city skyline blur past the tinted windows, my mind raced through the meticulous preparations that had led to this exact moment of escape. Julian and Victoria genuinely thought they had left me destitute with their pathetic $200,000 settlement check, completely unaware of the reality. I had spent the last several months quietly and entirely legally liquidating every single personal asset I owned outside of their grasp. I systematically funneled those massive funds through a complex labyrinth of encrypted nodes, converting my entire net worth into anonymous digital trusts safely secured in the impenetrable banking systems of Switzerland. My financial footprint in the United States was entirely erased. I was effectively a ghost, fully funded and utterly untraceable. The moment the vehicle pulled up to the bustling international departure curb, I paid the driver and practically sprinted through the automatic sliding doors. My heart, which had remained perfectly calm and steady during the humiliating divorce signing, now hammered intensely against my ribs. I navigated quickly through the dense crowds until I finally spotted them standing safely near the priority check-in counters. There was Elena, my fiercely loyal and trusted nanny, holding the hands of my entire world. My 7-year-old daughter, Mia, was jumping happily, pointing at a massive airplane visible through the massive glass windows, while my 5-year-old son, Leo, was busy clutching his favorite stuffed bear closely to his chest. They were perfectly healthy, completely safe, and blissfully unaware of the ugly chaos unfolding behind us. "Mommy!" Leo cheered loudly, running forward on his little legs to wrap his tiny arms tightly around my knees. I dropped directly to the floor, pulling both of my beautiful children into a desperate, crushing embrace. The familiar sweet scent of their strawberry shampoo grounded my racing mind instantly. The absolute hardest part of my plan was officially over. Standing back up, I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the primary smartphone that Julian paid for. I powered down the device permanently. With a sharp press of my thumbnail, I popped the side tray open, extracted the tiny metallic SIM card, and snapped it cleanly in half. I dropped the broken pieces into a nearby metal trash bin, listening to the satisfying click as they hit the bottom. The absolute final chain linking me to the Sterling family was permanently severed. Less than an hour later, the four of us were safely buckled into the spacious, private suites of the first-class cabin on a direct flight bound for Zurich. As the massive jet engines roared to life with deafening power and the plane aggressively angled up into the bright blue sky, I pulled Mia and Leo closely to my chest. I looked out the small oval window, watching the proud skyscrapers of San Francisco shrink into tiny, insignificant blocks far beneath the thick white clouds. The city looked so peaceful and quiet from up high. But I knew the dark truth. Down below on the ground, the countdown had already begun, and an absolutely devastating storm was about to hit. As our flight leveled out at 35,000 feet over the vast expanse of the country, I connected my secure tablet to the premium in-flight wireless internet. I did not need to guess what was happening back on the ground because every major financial news network was broadcasting it live. Down in the heart of San Francisco, the massive Moscone Center had been completely transformed into a temple of unearned ego. The Sterling family had spared absolutely zero expense for the official launch of Aegis Nexus Solutions and its highly anticipated $3 billion initial public offering. Giant, high-definition light-emitting diode screens plastered the walls, projecting the company logo in pulsing, aggressive neon blue. I watched the live high-resolution feed as Julian stood center stage, soaking in the flashing cameras like a man parched for adoration. He was flanked by prominent reporters from top financial networks, eagerly thrusting microphones into his face. When asked about the revolutionary, impenetrable security algorithm at the core of the software, Julian did not even blink. "It took me years of relentless coding and sleepless nights," he lied smoothly to a national audience, using a practiced, humble tone that made my stomach churn. "I wanted to create an architecture that was fundamentally unhackable, a completely new standard for global data protection, and today, we deliver exactly that to our investors." He threw in a few complex technological buzzwords that I had personally taught him, utilizing phrases like dynamic heuristic encryption and quantum-resistant firewalls, stringing them together with the clumsy confidence of a parrot mimicking a professor. Standing proudly beside him was Victoria. She was draped in an aggressively expensive designer gown, beaming at the cameras as if she had personally birthed the future of the internet. "Julian has always possessed a truly visionary mind," she boasted to a breathless journalist. "From a very young age, I knew he was destined to reshape the technological landscape. Aegis Nexus Solutions is simply the manifestation of his pure, unadulterated genius." The absolute delusion of her statement was almost comical. The only thing Julian had ever successfully engineered was a way to take credit for the grueling labor of those around him. Off to the side of the main stage, capturing her own distorted version of reality, was Chloe. I switched my tablet over to her social media feed. She was currently live streaming to her hundreds of thousands of followers, holding her phone high to capture her overly contoured face and the massive crowd behind her. She paraded around the very important person area like a newly crowned queen, sipping from a crystal flute of absurdly expensive champagne. "Oh my God, you guys, the energy here is just completely insane," she practically squealed into the microphone, We are literally about to change the world in just a few minutes, and honestly, it feels so good to finally step into this role. Julian really needed a modern woman by his side, someone who actually understands the digital era, not some outdated, small-town girl who cannot even comprehend how a simple network operates. She flipped her hair perfectly, blowing a kiss to the camera. Sometimes you just have to clear out the old, useless hardware to make room for the ultimate upgrade, she added with a vicious, mocking wink. Her followers flooded the screen with heart emojis and praising comments, completely oblivious to the fact that the woman they were cheering for was dancing wildly on the edge of a precipice. The entire atmosphere inside the Moscone Center was practically intoxicating for the attendees. Hundreds of venture capitalists in perfectly tailored suits and Silicon Valley elite patted each other on the back. They swapped heavy cardstock business cards and loudly debated how many hundreds of thousands of shares they planned to purchase the second the market officially opened. Waiters drifted through the dense crowd, carrying silver trays loaded with beluga caviar and perfectly chilled vintage champagne. The room was drowning in the sound of clinking crystal, roaring laughter, and the distinct, arrogant hum of people who believed they were untouchable. They were happily toasting to a glorious new dynasty, raising their expensive drinks to celebrate the brilliant Sterling family empire. On the broadcast, a massive digital clock appeared on the central screen above the stage, projecting a giant, glowing 10-minute countdown. The room began to buzz with a feverish anticipation. Julian confidently adjusted his silk tie and took his position behind a sleek, transparent glass podium. Resting right in the center of that podium was a single, illuminated physical button. Pressing it would simultaneously activate the core security network worldwide and officially open their stock for public trading. Through the high-definition screen, I watched them all smiling, laughing, and bathing in the blinding spotlight of their supposed triumph. They were so blinded by their own greed and vanity that they could not see the reality of their situation. They thought they were standing at the absolute pinnacle of the tech industry, preparing to ascend into the ranks of the ultra-wealthy. They had absolutely no idea that the solid ground beneath their custom leather shoes was nothing but a fragile illusion. They were enthusiastically throwing a massive multi-million-dollar party directly on top of a highly explosive digital minefield, and I had already lit the fuse. As I sat in the hushed luxury of the first-class cabin, listening to the steady, rhythmic hum of the aircraft engines, my eyes remained locked on the tablet screen. The countdown clock at the Moscone Center showed exactly 8 minutes remaining. 8 minutes until Julian confidently presented a masterpiece he had absolutely no hand in creating, the brutal reality. A secret strictly guarded within the walls of our home was that Julian Sterling had never written a single, functional line of code in his entire privileged life. He could barely troubleshoot a frozen email application, let alone architect a globally scalable cybersecurity defense grid. Every single line of the quantum-resistant algorithms, every dynamic neural pathway that made the software impenetrable, was born entirely from my mind, coded during thousands of solitary hours while he attended lavish networking galas. The true unraveling of their empire began exactly 6 months ago. It did not start with a lipstick stain on a collar or a suspiciously hidden text message. It started with a minor, almost imperceptible anomaly in the data flow of our secure home network. I was running a routine diagnostic check late one evening when I noticed an unauthorized, encrypted tunnel routing traffic directly from Julian's private study. I traced the connection, expecting to find a low-level malware infection. Instead, I bypassed his laughably weak password protection and stumbled straight into a hidden server partitioned for his private communications. That was exactly when I discovered his explicit messages and highly intimate photos with Chloe. A normal wife might have screamed, thrown plates, or hired a vicious divorce attorney the very next morning. But I was not a normal wife. I was a cybersecurity architect. My immediate instinct was not to confront the breach emotionally, but to quarantine and analyze it. I initiated a deep, silent system audit across all of his connected devices, and within 48 hours, the heartbreaking betrayal of a cheating husband was entirely eclipsed by a much darker, far more dangerous reality. Chloe was not merely a naive, starry-eyed influencer desperate for a wealthy tech patron. The social media persona was nothing more than a meticulously crafted cover. Beneath the lip gloss and the perfectly staged selfies, she was a highly trained operative specializing in corporate economic espionage. The encrypted tunnel I had found was not just for late-night video calls. It was a massive, high-speed data siphon. She was methodically exfiltrating the proprietary blueprints of Aegis Nexus Solutions and selling them directly to a notorious syndicate of black market technology brokers based overseas. The sheer magnitude of the security breach was staggering. Julian, completely blinded by lust and his own staggering ego, had casually bypassed every single foundational security protocol I had ever built to impress his young mistress and allow her to help him manage his schedule. He had granted her device absolute, top-tier administrative privileges. He practically handed the master keys of a multi-billion-dollar fortress to a foreign spy, all because she praised his non-existent genius. The professional protocol required me to immediately sever her connection, involve federal authorities, and lock down the entire corporate mainframe. But if I did that, the Sterling family would have instantly deployed their army of highly paid lawyers to cover it up. They would have spun a narrative, protected Julian, and quietly pushed me out with nothing. So, I made a different choice. I chose to do absolutely nothing to stop her. Instead of closing the back door she was using, I widened it. I created a silent, invisible observation deck within the network architecture. For 6 grueling months, I sat back and watched her steal. I logged every single illicit data packet, traced every offshore financial wire transfer she received, and documented the internet protocol addresses of her foreign handlers. I built an undeniable, cryptographic mountain of treasonous evidence, all securely stored on a private server only I could access. Then came the matter of the intellectual property. The Sterlings had spent weeks shoving complex legal documents in my face, completely confident that their expensive corporate attorneys had drafted airtight waivers stripping me of all equity. They were entirely focused on the shares and the money. They never bothered to have an actual engineer audit the foundational patent filings deeply embedded within the software registry. Months before this morning's boardroom meeting, I quietly restructured the licensing agreements of the core algorithm. I integrated a highly specific, legally binding digital smart contract directly into the source code itself. It was a fail-safe mechanism tied explicitly to my legal marital status and my continued employment. The settlement papers I signed this morning were not just a divorce decree. They were the activation sequence. The moment I placed that silver pen on the paper and officially renounced my rights as Julian's wife, the smart contract verified the termination of my association with the company. Legally, the core algorithm instantly revoked its own copyright licenses from Aegis Nexus Solutions. The software Julian was about to launch no longer belonged to the company. It reverted to my sole, independent ownership. More importantly, that simple signature triggered a buried subroutine I had custom designed for this exact occasion. I called it the Mirror Protocol. It was a silent, dormant virus waiting patiently at the very center of the system. Once awakened, it would not destroy the network. Instead, it would reflect every hidden truth outward. It was designed to completely bypass the user interface, override all administrative commands, and violently expose the raw, unfiltered back-end data to anyone watching. On my tablet screen, the massive digital clock in the Moscone Center ticked down to the final 60 seconds. Julian proudly rested his hand on the glass podium, hovering just inches above the activation button. He was preparing to launch his legacy. He had absolutely no clue that he was actually reaching for the detonator. The digital countdown on the colossal screens inside the Moscone Center ticked down to its final 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8. A heavy, electrifying silence fell over the massive auditorium. Thousands of industry titans, institutional investors, and global journalists held their collective breath, their eyes fixed on the gleaming glass podium at the center of the stage. Waiters froze in place, balancing silver trays of champagne, completely captivated by the historic moment unfolding before them. Julian leaned into the microphone. He flashed a brilliant, practiced smile that belonged on a billboard, exuding the false confidence of a conqueror who had never fought a single battle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian's voice boomed through the state-of-the-art surround sound system, echoing with extreme arrogance. "Today, we do not just launch a product, we launch a revolution. We officially redefine the very concept of global digital security. I present to you the impenetrable future of Aegis Nexus Solutions. 3, 2, 1. With a theatrical sweeping motion, Julian slammed his hand down onto the glowing activation button. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar of applause. The flashing bulbs of hundreds of cameras turned the auditorium into a blinding sea of white light. Everyone expected the massive light-emitting diode screens towering above the stage to burst into celebratory graphics, projecting the opening bell of the stock exchange and the soaring green charts of their $3 billion initial public offering. For a fraction of a second, the screen went completely black. Then, it did not turn blue. It did not show a stock ticker. It detonated into a blinding, violent, blood-red glare that physically forced the audience in the front rows to shield their eyes. A harsh mechanical siren ripped through the auditorium speakers, instantly drowning out the applause. The celebratory cheers abruptly morphed into murmurs of deep confusion. Julian furrowed his brow, tapping the microphone nervously, clearly assuming the event production team had made a catastrophic visual error. Victoria, standing near the edge of the stage, shot a furious, lethal glare toward the backstage control booth. But this was no technical glitch. The mirror protocol had successfully awakened. Massive, bold white letters began slamming across the blood-red displays, towering 50 feet high for the entire world to read. Critical administrative vulnerability detected. Active data exfiltration in progress. The confused murmurs in the crowd rapidly escalated into shouts of alarm. Journalists instinctively aimed their massive broadcast cameras directly at the screen, zooming in on the warnings. The screen split into multiple high-definition panels, executing the next phase of my command. It bypassed every single public relations filter and began dumping raw, undeniable evidence of their absolute incompetence directly onto the main stage. First came the access logs. The screens displayed high-resolution photographs of Chloe sitting in the VIP lounge just 20 minutes prior, holding her phone. Beside those images, the system projected her exact digital footprint, showing that her specific device had been logged into the deepest, most secure servers of Aegis Nexus Solutions using Julian's personal master credentials. Then came the financial receipts. The mirror protocol displayed highly encrypted offshore banking statements, translating the hidden cryptocurrency ledgers into plain English. Row after row of illicit transactions flooded the screen. $500,000 transferred to a shell company in Eastern Europe. $1.2 million wired to an anonymous syndicate account. Finally, the protocol unleashed the most damning evidence of all the chat logs. Massive text bubbles appeared on the screens, showcasing Chloe's private communications with her black market handlers. "I have the latest patch," one of Chloe's messages read, time-stamped from the night before. "The CEO is a complete idiot. He gave me his iPad so I could organize his calendar. Downloading the core encryption keys now. Send the remaining $2 million to the Swiss account before I leave the house." The response from the handler appeared underneath, "Funds transferred. Keep him distracted until the public launch." The atmosphere inside the Moscone Center shattered into absolute pandemonium. The silence of anticipation was violently replaced by the chaotic roar of financial panic. The venture capitalists, who just moments ago were toasting to their impending wealth, dropped their crystal champagne flutes directly onto the concrete floor. The sound of shattering glass echoed everywhere. They frantically pulled out their smartphones and heavily encrypted trading tablets, screaming into their headsets at their respective brokerage firms. "Pull the orders," a prominent hedge fund manager shrieked from the second row, his face completely pale. "Cancel everything. Dump the shares immediately. The entire architecture is compromised." The stock had not even officially opened for trading on the main floor, but in the pre-market institutional exchanges, the numbers went into a catastrophic freefall. The valuation plummeted from $3 billion to $2 billion, then $1 billion, slicing through financial support lines like a hot knife through butter. Within 60 seconds, the share price had effectively dropped to zero. On stage, absolute panic gripped Julian. The flawless facade melted right off his face, leaving behind the terrified, incompetent fraud he truly was. He abandoned the podium and sprinted toward the master control terminal set up on the side of the stage. His hands were shaking violently as he smashed the keyboard, desperately trying to initiate a hard system reboot or sever the internet connection. He tried to yank the heavy power cables directly out of the wall, but the backup generators had already locked the screens into an independent power loop. "Turn it off!" Julian screamed at the production crew, spit flying from his mouth. "Cut the main power. Shut the screens down, right now." He slammed his palms against the terminal, entering his emergency override codes. The system rejected him instantly. The red warning on his private monitor vanished, replaced by a sleek, impenetrable black screen featuring a single line of crisp, white text. The mirror protocol delivered its final, fatal blow to his ego. Copyright exclusively and independently owned by Sophia White. Unauthorized access denied. Julian stared at the text, his chest heaving as the horrifying reality finally crushed him. The software did not belong to him. The company was essentially an empty, worthless shell, and the woman he had just casually discarded had engineered his total destruction. Behind him, the illusion of the perfect Sterling family was tearing itself apart in front of thousands of flashing cameras. Chloe stood frozen in her designer gown, her face drained of all color. The glamorous influencer persona was completely gone. She began sobbing uncontrollably, thick streaks of expensive mascara running down her cheeks as she realized she was entirely exposed. Julian spun around from the locked terminal, his eyes wide with a manic, unhinged fury. He lunged across the stage, completely ignoring the reporters and the live television feed broadcasting his meltdown to millions of viewers worldwide. He grabbed Chloe violently by the shoulders, shaking her so hard her diamond earrings violently whipped back and forth. "What did you do?" Julian roared, his voice cracking hysterically. "You stole from me. You sold my company." "Get your hands off me," Chloe shrieked, batting his arms away defensively while sobbing loudly. "It is your fault. You handed me the passwords. You were too busy looking at yourself in the mirror to even notice what was happening on your own network." Victoria, entirely losing her aristocratic composure, charged forward in her high heels like a wild animal. She grabbed Chloe by the fabric of her expensive gown, yanking her aggressively backward. "You filthy, thieving little rat!" Victoria screamed at the top of her lungs, her carefully styled hair flying wildly out of place. "You ruined my son. You destroyed our legacy." Chloe shoved the older woman away, screaming profanities that echoed through the high-definition microphones and straight into the living rooms of millions of shocked viewers. Julian stepped back, grabbing his own hair in a frantic panic, screaming at both of them to shut up while the red screens continued to cycle through endless pages of their combined crimes. They were trapped on a glowing stage of their own making, trapped in a cage of absolute humiliation. There was no public relations team in the world powerful enough to save them now. The Sterling family empire had not just collapsed, it had violently exploded in broad daylight, burning them all to ash while the entire world watched and cheered for their downfall. The chaotic screaming on the main stage of the Moscone Center was suddenly and violently interrupted by a massive, echoing crash. The heavy reinforced double doors at the back of the auditorium were thrown wide open. The flashing cameras of the press immediately pivoted away from the disgraced Sterling family, capturing a terrifying new reality. Dozens of heavily armed agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, wearing dark tactical gear, swarmed down the main aisles. They were flanked by a small army of stern-faced officials from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Exactly 1 hour before Julian pressed that disastrous button, A massive, heavily encrypted dossier had automatically unpacked itself on the secure servers of both federal agencies. The anonymous package contained every single shred of evidence I had meticulously gathered over the past 6 months. Julian did not even have the chance to formulate a lie. Two massive federal agents stormed the glass podium, forcefully spinning my ex-husband around and slamming his hands behind his back. The distinct, sharp click of cold steel handcuffs snapping shut echoed through the high-definition microphones. Julian began weeping like a child, his knees buckling as they dragged him away from his shattered empire. Victoria, completely losing her mind, attempted to slap a federal agent who approached her. She shrieked wildly about her powerful lawyers and her elite status, completely oblivious to the fact that her aristocratic shield had just evaporated. She was swiftly restrained, her designer gown tearing as she was forcefully marched off the stage in absolute disgrace. As for Chloe, she did not even try to run. She collapsed entirely onto the polished wooden floor, sobbing hysterically as an agent read her rights, charging her with severe counts of economic espionage, wire fraud, and severe violations of national security. In less than 5 minutes, the entire Sterling legacy was wiped from the face of the earth. Their company was officially bankrupt. Their assets were being aggressively frozen by the government, and all three of them were staring down the barrel of multiple decades in federal prison. Thousands of miles away from that pathetic, miserable circus, the air was remarkably still. I sat at a quiet, sun-drenched table on a beautiful stone terrace overlooking the crystal-clear waters of Lake Geneva in Switzerland. I took a slow, comforting sip of my warm cappuccino, savoring the rich, roasted flavor. I opened my secure, encrypted laptop one final time and logged into the temporary network portal. My burner inbox was completely overflowing. There were exactly 42 frantic voicemails from Julian, all left in the chaotic 15-minute window before the authorities officially confiscated his mobile devices. I clicked on the very first audio file. Julian was hyperventilating, his voice reduced to a pathetic, high-pitched squeal. He was sobbing loudly, begging me to fix the system, screaming that he was sorry, and pleading for me to somehow save him from the federal agents breaking down his corporate doors. I did not even bother listening to the rest. The sound of his absolute despair brought me zero joy, but it brought me a profound, undeniable sense of closure. I opened a new message window, addressing it directly to the primary Sterling family group email. I kept my final goodbye incredibly brief. I gave you the stage. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do not try to find me. I hit send. Without a single moment of hesitation, I navigated directly to the core security settings of the server and pressed the button labeled Delete Account Permanently. The screen flashed white for a brief second before confirming the total eradication of my digital presence. I gently closed the silver lid of the laptop, sealing away my past forever. Mommy, look. I turned my head. Mia and Leo were running happily across the stone terrace, their faces flushed with pure joy. Leo pointed his tiny finger eagerly toward the horizon, where the majestic, snow-capped peaks of the Swiss Alps pierced the bright, cloudless blue sky. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached all the way to my eyes for the first time in 7 years. I stood up from the table, leaving the powered-down laptop behind. I walked over and took both of their warm little hands in mine. As we walked together into the brilliant, golden sunlight, I felt lighter than air. I had successfully burned a toxic, parasitic empire straight to the ground, leaving nothing but ashes in my wake. Our old life was completely gone, but as I looked down at my beautiful, safe children, I knew our real life had finally just begun. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We would absolutely love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below and let us know. If you found today's journey empowering and satisfying, please consider helping us keep this channel alive by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon community. There, you can listen to our absolute best, highly detailed, exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publicize on YouTube. You can easily join us by scanning the Patreon QR code currently on your screen, or by using the Patreon link provided in the description or the pinned comment below. Thank you again, and we will see you in the next story.